Well, a good morning to all of you. It seems like over the last few weeks, aside from the weekly podcast, there's been a purpose to do another online presentation of some kind. Last week it was the interview with Jake, and apparently that's going to be continued. But Dave and I have been going back and forth since the very first time he ever mentioned the phrase CLPT and CLPF, and I had a fundamental understanding of what that kind of light influence was. I just want to dig deeper into it for myself. And so, although, since then I have a greater comprehension of it, I really want to hear from Dave himself and expand on this. Over the last few weeks, there have been new tribes that have shown up that have seen these blinking lights. And every time I hear it again, I'm convinced that they're having real communication with some other entity, something higher than themselves. And this is indicative of what Dave has been describing. So I want really Dave to help others understand more about that, because when they see those lights in the sky and they think that they're communicating them, that's exactly what's taking place. So having said that, Dave, please expand my base of understanding and
Uh,
help others understand it as well. Because when you told me about it, it resonated with me totally. And I really wanted to sink in some more.
okay. Thank you, Lowell. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to see everybody looking so well. Um, when Lowell and I were talking briefly yesterday and decided to do this, there's some things that came up first before we were going to talk about CLPT. And one of them is just terminology that all of us use. And it's interesting, like if you want to talk about the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, all the way up to 11, 12, or 88 or 8 million, doesn't really matter. Uh, there's no cap on that. There really isn't. Um, there's a shared simplicity in everything in the design of the universe. And without one thought turning into another, I wanted to bring up this simple observation first before we talk about continuous light pulse technologies and how we receive that information. So if someone's talking about the fourth or fifth dimension, what about people that mention it as the fourth or fifth density? Okay, so you have people that use the word dimension, you have people that use the word density. Now, density within tribe may have 4 or 5 meanings to some people, maybe 10, or it may be an extrapolate from your own personal experiences, but there's no lexicon to the terminology that we use. There's no encyclopedia. With all the stuff they've given me, I would love to sit down and write some kind of lexicon or some sort of book out that says, ascension. It's not just a balloon going up, it's blah, blah, blah. So, and this, overwrought words, when we want to talk about science, people oftentimes use the word electromagnetism without really considering the functions of electromagnetism and how it works in physics or in reality. But I'm not sure about the word density, so you'll never hear me using it. And then the other one was light language. This is a very important term because light language can mean many things, and it means many things for many different people. A friend of mine who is a specialist in sacred geometry, she talks about light language as a means to both communicate with the light, the spiritual light that's generated by your thoughts, to higher beings that also communicate in light. And then there's the light language that someone like Alec Collier mentioned. When we saw Alex Collier up in Shasta a year and a half ago, I had a moment to speak to him, and he was talking about Andromedeans have this ability to flash lights just right sort of emanating from their upper forehead. or their frontal lobe, and they flash these lights. And they can read these lights because they're what are also called light packages. And light packages have several different meanings in this reality as far as mainstream science. But you guys have heard me talk about encoding many pieces of information into a package of light. So for me, a light package is a highly detailed, highly compressed, understandable uh, construct of many pieces of information that are put into the form of light and then sent to you. And you can either receive them if you have higher telekinesis and psychic abilities like Andromedeans, and you can receive them like a flash of light and immediately you understand what the thought is. Or you can use the device that they showed me that we did the diagrams on in the 4-part series, and you can send a light package that way, and you can anneal symbols to excited atoms and turn them into a static light object and send it. Light packages can be something that we receive from a ship. It can be something that we receive from a spiritual entity, and they can be things that we're not aware of. So when I talk about light packages, I I'm always referring to CLPF and CLPT and the language of communication that I was shown whilst I was being invited to become a Torin ambassador. And there were so many aspects of everything that they showed me in that short amount of time that the CLPT program was amongst the most valuable of all the programs they had shown me, because I had realized that in order to expand regions of our mind or our brain that we don't, and I don't want to confuse the difference between mind and brain, because Steve Turpin, the aerospace engineer who we spoke with, made a distinction. So my mind is the compilation of my spiritual intuition and my intellectual intuition, and my brain is the object in which these things are stored, that they live in and they're expressed through. Because we can express from our heart, but you're more likely to express a thought of compassion from your brain than you are from your left elbow. So pretty sure everything comes from this region. So when I talk about light packages and light language, I'm not necessarily trying to say that this is a spiritual language made from feelings or a spiritual language made from a transference of psychic thought. So when I talk about light language, it's a whole series of light that are coordinated mathematically that come to us, that our brain is hardwired to understand. And it isn't until you remove all the chemicals and the alcohol and the really terrible things that change your mind or change your brain, you have to really work on removing things like heavy metals and toxins in order to let your brain heal itself so that you can have full functionality of your higher cognitive centers. Now, higher cognitive centers are the regions right up here, sort of like a corona above our head, right where your 7th chakra meets the universe. And the higher cognitive centers is like a conduit for communication, not to be confused with Broca's area. The higher cognitive communication now that I'm talking about is spiritual in nature or intellectual, psychic in nature, where you're able to just think a message and your friend who comes from another galaxy will hear it almost immediately because he has complete cognitive function of his higher centers. It's very difficult for us. You know, we have an amazing, wonderful brain, but we don't spend enough time working on understanding it and developing the abilities that we have. When we were manipulated from a Homo habilis upright walking species, they realized that we had some stumbling blocks that they couldn't change. If they changed them, we wouldn't be who we are. They would have just made a robot, a bio-robot. You see, and those stumbling blocks are the fear flight response and our need to only accept that which we can see, because it's our physical world and our physical environment, and the intellect and the emotions that are developed over millions of years about our physical environment are very connected to our ancient brain. So when we want to access our higher functions, we have to put those things in check through meditation, through being calm, through changing the words and the nature of the thoughts that we have, because we also discuss thoughts are things. And this is the key to being able to eliminate fear, suspicion, and your inability to accept that which is happening. You see, it isn't that wonderful spiritual things don't happen to people who are complete agnostics to the spiritual metaphysical world. They just refuse to see it because it goes outside the guidelines of their physical life. And this is part of the problem with having a very deep-centered ancient pre-brain. So when they came down to manipulate our genetics to advance us, they knew that they couldn't go in there and change those enzymes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be who we are. So it isn't just cooking meat to produce protein that ancient Neanderthal or Australopithecines or Zinjanthropus or any of the other Homo hominids that lived millions of years ago. It isn't just converting protein that made them smarter. And that's the excuse that they use in modern medicine, modern anthropology, and anthropological studies. They say that cooking meat and the invention or discovery of fire is why we have a cerebrum. And that's the big wrinkly mass that ensconces your early pre-brain. So the genetic change that our friends gave us was the development of our cerebrum. And when we are able to access our higher cognitive functions and start developing a relationship with our brain, then you start to understand that there's special ways that we can communicate with each other, and it becomes easier to use things like ESP and telekinesis. I'm going to show an image of an example of CLPT, and this is continuous light pulse technology. And when we receive a flash of light, it could very much be that flash of light has a huge amount of coordinated technology, which goes down your optic nerve, is converted and assimilated by your parietal lobe, and sent out as an electrochemical response to the region of the brain which the image or the frequency of light is designed to attenuate. So let's just have a look at one of the images, and it's a physics symbol. It's the coefficient of linear expansion. And I'll explain it briefly. I know that you guys know I have a physics background, but we'll keep it simple. So let me just do a share, go into photo. Sorry about the way this is going. For some reason, I can't load lots of pictures up, and I'll have a look at that later. Here we go. All right. So this is the coefficient of linear expansion put into a lens where I have separated all of the physics nomenclature and put it into a single line, and then stacked each one of the symbols on top of each other. And I made a light lens. So if I shone a light through that, then you would receive the coefficient of linear expansion in a linear format with photons. So let's just go ahead and get out of that. All right, so let me just show you what the equation looks like. It's pretty simple. So I'm going to just hold this up, and I'll use my non-laser laser pointer. All right, so here's your coefficient, and the L is for linear. So this is a coefficient for linear expansion, and that's the whole formula for it. So if you do it looks like a D. So it's so just go DL, and L stands for length. So you've got coefficient linearity, you've got DL right here, and this is for the unit change in length. DT is the unit change in temperature. That's why there's a T. And then LO is the unit's length of the object that's changed. It's the initial length of the object. So the coefficient of linear expansion is a coefficient that explains the rate of change of a unit length per unit degree change in temperature. And that's basically what it is. And so we need the coefficient of linear expansion when we're designing a pathway for a rocket, or when we're designing a parabolic pathway for a launch. You have to consider how things expand with temperature. So if you're going to use the coefficient for linear expansion, then you use this formula alongside the coefficient for rotational and angular kinematics. And so that gives you spin, rotation, and you can calculate in your electromagnetism from the planet. You can calculate in diversions, turns that you have to make. So it's a coefficient that helps physicists describe the fundamentals of travel through space. And it also has to do with things here on Earth. I mean, it could be about a heating element in a boiler. It could be about anything, because it has to do with the way things change their length due to temperature change. So it's a coefficient for linear expansion. So what I showed you was the stacked version of that formula. And I'll just show you something else. There we go. Let's try that again. Sorry, guys. Galleries.
Doing great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so now what we have in this image, can you see that?
Almost. There we go.
All right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Right. So that's the same formula, only it's written lengthwise. And so you're looking at the coefficient symbol and the L for linearity as the first two items. And then the third item is the equals, those two lines. And then remember, we talked about DL, DT, and LO, the unit charge in length and the unit change in temperature. So that is the linearized version of that equation as it's written out on separate lenses, because it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 11 physics symbols that's been compressed into one. And this is the three-dimensional shadow image, and which I think is very interesting, because it makes sort of an interesting pyramid with a little dude standing in front of it, and then it looks like a little duck or a little bird over to the right. One of the spooky things that I discovered in linearizing physics nomenclature and equations and formulas is that each one of them produces an image that's not entirely dissimilar from the name of the formula. And it's a spooky aspect about perhaps this language that physicists use today is hundreds of millions of years old and probably comes from Atlantis, because whoever designed physics realized that each symbol, when stacked differently with other symbols, produces different three-dimensional geometric shapes. This is one of the tools of continuous light pulse flashes. You see, they will send you all sorts of interesting physics in a line, and it's made from light, and it goes right into your eye, and your brain coordinates that image and knows that it's a mathematic image. And your brain also knows that this three-dimensional image is the coefficient for linear expansion. So it's
I remember
very
the
unusual
night
stuff.
we had dinner together and you showed me this after dinner. You were going to put it up on the wall
Oh, yeah.
so we could see the image. And when I had recently gone through sigils and understanding what a sigil is and how it's constructed. And so when you laid out those um, lenses and then stacked them, it just clicked. I get
Right.
it.
So it's
Here is if we could understand beyond our capacity to try and exhibit fourth dimensional constructs in a three-dimensional world. Here it is. So when you see that pressed like that and you shined it up on the wall, totally made sense to me. Then there's multiple
oh,
symbols in there and you get to tear it apart.
I am Lowell. I'm the only human being on the planet who has taken physics symbols and physics nomenclature in the form of an equation, and instead of reading it in a two-dimensional format of reading a one-dimensional symbol left to right, I've turned them this way so that
Yes.
they become one symbol. So let me just share another image of the same equation. Okay. Have you got that?
Yes. There we
Okay.
go.
So this is the symbol that it produces if you want to look at the two-dimensional version of that 11 symbol equation. This is the two-dimensional version of the coefficient of linear expansion. Now you see the shadow symbol?
Yep.
Okay. So in order to teach this higher mass language, it only needs to be taught alongside a tutorial of everyday physics that we teach today on a chalkboard. So if I was going to write out the formula, I would explain what the coefficient of linear expansion does. And then I would show you the symbol, which represents the coefficient of linear expansion. And it's easier for me to study that symbol and write it out as a single symbol than it is to write out the formula in a line.
Yes.
You see, higher mathematics was given to humankind as a gift. It's always existed. But we didn't become interesting to our friends above until Aristotle and Pythagoras and some of the other greater thinkers from thousands of years ago. Because, with the concept of human beings thinking about food, sex, and money all the time, why would they come down and help us? So I'm the first person who they showed this to. And so I've spent the last 6 years putting together a mathematics tutorial and a program. And I think I mentioned that I had my friend Asher. He's getting involved with me because there's also a sound attribute that goes with each physics symbol. Not only is there a sound attribute to each of the little tiny bits of nomenclature, like the 11 equation symbols, there's a sound frequency for each one of those. So what Asher is going to help me do is develop a harmonic scale of frequencies, which will obviously change into different frequential tones per equation that's linearized. So if I could sing the song of Einstein's equation, right? Because it's not the one that they did on a piano. That is pretty, but it doesn't give you the fundamental three-dimensional and two-dimensional and single-dimensional image that your mind requires in order to understand the higher geometry behind each of these equations throughout all 11 branches of physics. Because each of these, just like an image I'm about to share, you guys saw the pyramid with the little guy standing in front. Each of those can be printed out Whoops, sorry about that, guys. Each of those can be printed out so that they make a very curious three-dimensional shape. So that three-dimensional shape is a physical representation of the higher geometry of a linearized physics formula or equation. So I'm the only person that's been burdened with this. And so after 5 years of studying higher physics, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and going back to university, I finally sort of cracked the code so that I can put it into a semblance of easy to understand instructions for humans. And Asher has finally stepped in a little bit to relieve me of the next part, because I'm not Asher's an amazing musician, and he's also a technophile. So he has all this amazing equipment for sound mixing and all kinds of stuff. So whatever he comes up with, it doesn't have to be the Cambridge University version. We're not looking for that. But what we are looking for is to produce a song or a series of music so that the next time I meet somebody from Andromeda, I can go, and he'll understand. It'll cognate a physics coordination. He'll understand. And what we can do as we work on this physics language is that it will help develop your cognitive centers of your higher thinking. Because we need to push ourselves to evolve. We need to push ourselves dynamically in a very deep and meaningful way in order for us to see above the non-virtuous reality that's being presented to us 100% of the time. So we have to push ourselves so that our mind evolves, our brain evolves, and as we do evolve, what do you think the natural thing is going to happen? You're going to have cranial expansion. But this takes many hundreds of thousands of years. But unless we tax ourselves to understand the infinite amount of information that exists in everything around us and understanding the languages. So when I spoke to some scientists, when I went to the Taurus cloud, these symbols were how they teach their children mathematics. So if it takes a day and a half to fill out all of the equations behind Einstein's theory of relativity into the 5,000 symbols on a chalkboard that's a mile long, well, they could do that with about 60 symbols, and there's a sound attribution to each symbol. So it removes many, many hundreds and thousands of hours to study these forms of mathematics, because once we release this textbook, what we're going to be able to do is eliminate thousands of hours wasted with a stick made out of diatoms at a chalkboard doing this. And you can do that with your mind. If you understand physics, you don't need to sit there for thousands of hours. See, we were taught this way because why? Think about cuneiform. Think about a clay tablet. We've been sticking a gosh darn stick on a clay tablet for 12,000 years, people. It's time to change the way you do mathematics. That's the nice way of saying it.
You
It's just
referred to
really,
yourself in the past as an interpreter. And so here is exactly what you're doing. The first time you showed me, like I said, the night we had dinner together, and you showed me how this construct worked, it freaking got it. I had a session with Yade Yamaya shortly after that where I described something that they told me we were getting, and they've remarked on how I had come along so quickly because I understood the concept. That's what when you showed that to me at first, and after the Lemurians had mentioned to me last year that it's time for humanity to understand this new vibration. That vibration in our new means of communication is no longer words like this. It's symbols, colors, sound, and vibration. There is, the palette by which we're going to communicate with one another. Dave's already, just touched on the fact that he and I giggle now at how many times we are thinking the same thing right before I pick up the phone to call him. The topic was already, on our in our radar together. So go back to this, because this is the
Okay,
part I
so
want people to understand more.
this is another lens that I drew. Remember, this is on a card with a very clear non-electrostatic plastic sheeting. And it's very hard to, I have to make my own ink, because there's no ink that you can write on plastic that doesn't mildly dissipate and remain solid. So these are handwritten. Eventually there'll be a computer program where the computer can print these images out. But right now, all of that has to be programmed into a computer. And I have friends that write programs, but we're holding off on this until I get the simple fundamental parts done. All right, so this is another equation. This is the spherical time wave infinite function. Spherical time wave infinite function. And this is the shadow that it casts. Now, when I rock the lens back and forth from left to right, the center, the shadow, three-dimensional shadow image has a sphere that rotates independently of the exterior sphere. All of this is going to be put into a film. I have so little time to produce the thousands of images that I want to share with everybody. This is what I spend all of my mental energy on. So this is a sphere that rotates within another sphere. And you'll see what looks like at the bottom of the shadow is a sign for infinity, and that's indeed what it is. There's also an infinity symbol in the center. It looks like a bow tie in the center oval. So there's about 16 different, 17, 18, 19 different symbols, bits of physics nomenclature that produce the equation for spherical time wave infinite function. So when I rock it to the left and right, there's a sphere that rotates within the other one. So this is what I'm trying to also explain in this, is that there's something very spooky when we linearize physics, because the symbols themselves that are represented in a three-dimensional nature oftentimes represent the name of the physics equation in the first place. So spherical time wave infinite function. So this is an equation that I would use while developing the palametry table for interstellar navigation. And this is a very important physics equation for interstellar navigation at very high speeds.
That's how you and I got onto this topic in the first place. Somehow the conversation turned where you were going to share your knowledge of palametry and how you acquired that and what it took for you to comprehend it. And so these were the pieces I had to understand first. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, palametry is I'm not revealing anything about that publicly.
No, I totally understand. I'm just trying to draw a correlation so people understand how it is that we began to have these conversations, and how this was put into our field in the first place. My correlation between those packets, now I see those as packets of light information, and when we get downloads here, here's where I connect the CLPT and CLPF with what we're actually getting. Here it is.
Your brain will do this naturally. So oftentimes we don't even recognize that it's happening, but we'll wake up a day later or a week later or a month later, and the information will have compressed.
Yep.
And the nice thing about this language that I'm writing, and by the way, it's called quantum hypertext. Quantum hypertext can be what I call decollapsed. So if I show you a two-dimensional, three-dimensional image on a lens, and you see the two-dimensional image, like the coefficient of linear expansion, that can be turned sideways again, and decollapsed and then turned this way so that you can validate its Edwardian origins. And let's call it Edwardian physics, because it really wasn't until the late 16th, early 17th century, mid 17th century that physics came into the language of its own. And that's how it was taught. And it's a members only club, and they make it very difficult for everyday folks to understand it. Some of us have the ability to, and some of us don't. And like I said, I was a maths dunce all through school, and it wasn't until Kim Jim came and got me, and they helped me clean up the rest of my brain, then I was able to withstand the vast amount of information that they gave me. The preponderance of the facts that are going to start coming out and being revealed to everybody from what I'm doing is going to blow your minds. So let's do another little share real quick. I'm sorry about the inconvenience of doing it this way.
Take your time. We got no appointments.
Right on. Just go to gallery.
This is the kind of
CLPT.
information you need to be spoon fed a little bit along the way anyhow.
Okay, so this is so we were talking about the dimensionality that a linear object that's been turned into a two-dimensional object, the dimensionality that it possesses once you shine a light through it. So this crop circle is a 1/4 mile in diameter. It showed up within 6 or 7 hours in the evening. I think it's in Dorchester. People that are afraid of higher intellect and people who are afraid of evolving because they're so embarrassed about their own behavior, that must be the only excuse, want you to believe, those are the people that want you to believe that as some drunken Southern England guy who owns the farm who strapped plywood to his feet and went ice skating.
I have seen
the other excuse that mainstream media uses and mainstream thinkers use is, let's call mainstream thinkers the same as mainstream media. We'll just call them MT instead of MM. The same mainstream thinkers want you to believe that if it wasn't a big fat drunken farmer with plywood strapped to his feet, then it was an animal called a vole or a hedgehog. Right? So if a vole or a hedgehog is making these illustrations, then I definitely want a hedgehog or a vole to lead our country.
Definitely. They're connected to sacred geometry like crazy.
Right. So luckily there's been some captures. Lights have been seen coming out of the earth, and they do this dance in the sky, and then they go straight up or they disappear. And it's Gaia communicating to our friends from Vega and Cygnus and Lyra. It's Gaia communicating to our friends. And she communicates to us if we're careful enough to love her and listen to her. But the idea behind a crop circle is not dissimilar to the mathematics language that I was taught by them.
That was exactly what I was just thinking while I was looking at this again.
Thank you. Yeah, if you take this image and you put it into a lens and you shine a light through it, you're going to see a three-dimensional shadow image, and you're going to see the three-dimensional shape in which this represents. Another interesting thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is that if you run a steel wire from the very bottom circle there, right up the center through all of those spheres coming out the top, and you put that steel wire on a rapidly rotating turntable, well, the image is going to spin left to right or right to left, whatever the direction. And then you're also going to see it look like it's solid, because the faster you spin it, the more it's going to look like a solid object. So I want to let you guys know, and this was originally for the ambassadors. And so I went around and I told everybody about 2 years ago. Crop circles are two things. They are a component to a machine, not much different than the Antikythera. But they're also a component to building a time machine. They're components for helielliptical and heliarcal magnetic manifestation machines, the kind that spin and open up gateways. The other thing that these are ancient genetic geometric patterns. So when crop circles show up, they're meant to awaken a deep genetic memory from your personal Akashic record, not mine. We have a shared record, but that's only because we're the same species. Each one of us has a deep connection to crop circles. And so they're made available to the many different tribes of humans on this planet. Now, I'm not going to use words like I resonate with that because, as a scientist, I just want to keep it plain language. But I feel very close to this image for many reasons, because it's pretty. It looks like a laser being shot, but it also looks like a flower, and it looks like an Indian mandala from Hindu liturgy. It looks like so many beautiful things. But here, as a mathematician or a maths theoretician who's trying to rewrite physics, to me, this is a component for a magnificent machine that will help take us off the planet Earth. So let's just go and put a different one up. And so we'll go back into CLPT. So let's look at the shadow of this again. This is spherical time wave infinite function. And just look at the shadow. And then there we go. This is a crop circle that's a little bit smaller than the other one. But I can tell you, having lived in England for 8 years, having lived all over the UK for 12, that those tractor tires are about 8 feet in back apart from each other. And the space is a 1/4 hectare, which is a little under a 1/4 acre. So each one of those bands. So that's an image that takes a full acre to describe. And it's a square acre, at least, only as a sphere. So you see that if we decollapse this image, what do you think is going to happen, Lowell? We're going to see many, many different symbols.
Yeah.
You get it? You get it?
There's a story there.
You get it?
Absolutely.
So it's a very high form of genetic mathematics. And these ancient Akashic records, which we carry within our chromosomes, are activated by the light frequency that reflects back from the image. We cannot see light. We cannot see light, but we can see the image we're looking at because of the light reflection off of it. So these are ancient symbols that reawaken our deepest psyche and our deepest soul that connects us with our past lives and helps give us a message of hope for the future, because we are an evolving species and we all need to just take a deep breath and to be calm and to love each other. And each one of these crop circles carries that very message. Why? Because it comes from Gaia and because it comes from our teachers and our parents above. All of us are star children. We're not contactee. All of us are related to each other through our angelic heavenly messengers. And so this is part of the process of understanding who we were. And if we're gifted and we're lucky and we make the right thoughts and decisions, who we may become in the future. So that's such a lovely image. And it's no different. It's no different than one of the linearized formatted equations in physics. It's just a very complex one. You see, I've taken 20 or 30 physics equations that have a multitude of 30, 40, 50 symbols per equation, and I put those in a long line. But when you shine a light through it, you need a laser. And when you shine a laser through it, which I've done, of course, then you get only a very small fraction of light and it becomes sort of a big black blob. So I asked the question of my friends, and they said that there's a formula called Euler's formula. And sure enough, it was something that I went over in my power series many years ago. And Euler's formula helps you break things down into mathematically countable components. So with this linearized equation of 1,500 symbols, by using Euler's formula, I was able to break it down into pods of 100 symbols each. So that crop circle image is a complete 1,500 or 2,000 symbol formula, which we need to look at, shine a light through it, create the three-dimensional model that the shadow produces so that you can hold it. That's why we have hands, everybody. That's why we have a nose and taste buds and sexual organs and ears. This is so that we can live and feel our environment around us. When human beings are given a three-dimensional shape to hold, then you're able to do the cycle of cognition. It's one thing listening to David talk to his friend Lowell. It's another to hold that very image that's been produced into a three-dimensional statue that you can hold and feel. Because what that does is it connects your body to your mind in such a special way. And if you go back to the block set that all of us had, where it's you hammer the peg into the circle, the square into the square, the triangle into the triangle. And, you know, a lot of us were hammering the circle into the square for a long time, and we still came out okay. I was one of those guys, right? Like the doctor was like, I don't know, Mrs. Bichon, and your kid's a little funny. And so, you know, so anyway, circles do fit into squares. And if they'd only allow us to be taught that when we were in grade school, right? Right. So let me show you another image, if I may. All right. So here's an image I used up in Shasta a couple years ago. And this is exactly what happens. You're receiving a light package of many million pieces of photic information, many million pieces of light. The light goes through your optic nerve back to the back of your brain and is processed by that lobe down there called the parietal lobes. And so right away, just a little ahead of the parietal lobe, what do you see? You see a tree. So you know the coordination of colors, photons, mathematic characteristics, the dimension in which you live, and the dimension of things outside of your own personal existence. Your brain immediately, faster than any quantum computer, your brain goes, that's a tree. And that's the magic of the human mind is we're going to talk about time like gravity and sound next year because I'm very, very lucky with this. I'm starting to figure out how all of it plays together. So I have another image to show you. All right. So those are biphotons. And biphotons have only recently, within the last 6 months, been discovered by medical science. If you'll remember a year and a half ago, I was talking about light flashes inside of our brain. And this is connected to your ability to produce a bright light. It flashes out of your forehead, and then Alex Collier and the rest of the Andromedans can read it. All right, so this is a biphoton. And those are neural ganglia. And it's a medical representation using a supercomputer so that we could get this image correct. So this biophoton is an image of the light that's transferred from your eyes down your optic nerve into your parietal lobes and then back out. So that information is sent back out and your brain absorbs those little particles. It absorbs the little particles of light so that you have cognition. So whether you're studying higher physics or whether you're studying anatomy or planetary sciences or crop circles, allow your mind to fully absorb the image that you're working with. And by working with things like crop circles and mathematics, it gives us this unique lesson about pausing, about pause for thought. Take your time. And the more we study the natural world around us and the more we study the heavens, it gives pause for thought that none of the decisions that humanity makes should ever be off the cuff or snap decisions. Everything that we do and partake in life must be driven by some form of solemnity, some form of deeper thought. Otherwise, our lives become meaningless. So we have to really think about our thoughts being things in order to understand the next progression of your spiritual humanity. My spiritual humanity is that I am in touch with Gaia, but I'm also in touch with the many beautiful aspects of frequencies of light and frequencies of sound, and how I can construct a light language and I can put it into a lens and a borosilicate rod, which we're building, and send that message out to the stars. Because I may not be in touch with people from Vega or Lyra, but I can sure as hell point them a mathematic composition in a borosilicate casing in a polycarbonate case, and now shoot it to them with a laser so that they receive a complete coordinated mathematic idea. And it'll strike anybody that looks at the light, and it'll cognate. So I'm doing to them what they do to us. And we're going to be taking this out into the desert in about 11 months and pointing it up at some different constellations. My special friend, who is a very talented guy who I'm not allowed to talk about, he and I are going to go out in the back of his 4x4 and go up to about 9,000, 10,000 feet. And I'll have a series of signals. I'll have a series of signals and messages for our friends, and we'll send those out.
Well,
So,
here's what I just want to connect the dots between your presentations in the past when you showed those illustrations, kind of under helping us understand those light packages that we were getting and the beams that we were getting and what was inside of that.
right.
This was just for me, it was an expansion on understanding that better. And here's where really we're constructing those things on our side instead of receiving them, so we understand here's the packet that if and when we're ready, like Dave suggests he's going to do soon, now we have the ability to send it out in languages that we've been receiving and for a long time have been ignorant to what this really was.
Oh, yeah, no. At least mathematically, I can coordinate messages now that they'll understand because their ship will receive the message. All right, because the same device, they have receptors on the outside of the skin of their ships. There's all sorts of fabulous technology. It'd take hours to talk about. So we can send them messages. But the reason I'm developing this language is not just to help humanity evolve, it's to remind people that physics existed many millennia ago, and we've rediscovered it. The physics of everything is out there, and we're constantly coming up with new equations. I'm going to tell you, there's roughly 500 billion equations being used every day, at least in the 11 branches of physics. 500 billion. You'd probably need 111 PhDs to handle all of it. I don't know anybody that's there. And I tell you, I've met people from other worlds that are like that are that smart. Their heads are like that. So whatever we do with this language, what I want to do is make sure that people realize that I'm not a great scientist. I'm a mass theoretician. and I'm a naturalist, and I'm just a guy. What they helped me with was clarity of thought, so that I could become, my greatest wish was to be clear thinking, so that I didn't react to anything in the world around me. And if I could think clearly, then I could think my way into or out of anything. And that's such a gift. But then I also asked for the help with mathematics. So I guess I'm a scientist, but I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of wonderful people that came before me. Uh, you know, I'm not going to say Newton was a great person. Tycho Brahe was pretty interesting. Johannes Kepler, lots of fabulous scientists, Eratosthenes and Pythagoras. But the language is theirs. All right. If they didn't show it to me to show you guys, it would have taken us another 10 or 30,000 years to find it. But whoever designed physics many millennia ago designed it in a way that each symbol, when stacked and you shine a light through, each symbol produces an image that's not completely unlikely than the name of the image. It's very curious, very strange. And when we hold the images, I've had a few of those mathematic formulas printed on a 3D printer. It helps me connect because I need to feel things with my hands as much as I do think about them. So when we look at those images, you have to remember that the same technology that they showed me applies to everything. Ancient languages, Sanskrit, cuneiform, Hieraic and Hieratic, right? Ancient Egyptian, hieroglyphs. Those too have a dimensionality. Each symbol has a dimensionality. They also have a unique physicality when you spin them. So they've left us so many clues about the dimensionality of our own language. It doesn't matter if you speak Urdu or Hindi or Ukrainian or English. Each language is connected to the great language that they have been teaching us since we were put together by them. And these messages are everywhere. We go back to the petroglyphs that were written 20,000 years ago by tribal elders who would take their clan for a march for 100 miles over a period of a month. And those symbols, those sacred symbols on the rocks, would teach the people where the basket of berries is, where the best river for fishing is, where the safety is, right? And that only those ancient peoples were able to use some 150 symbols, but put thousands of expressions in each of those symbols. It was a much more simple language than the one that we have now. And I remember some part from the Bible that says that mankind was divided and many languages were given to mankind, and whatever. But I think that actually complicated things. I think that complicated things because if humanity can learn to speak the same language, then there's no doubt that we'll all come to the same conclusion, right? So this mathematics aspect that they taught me, it makes me feel really good. I mean, I'm the first human being to do this, and I've shared it. I've shared it with some friends at Cambridge, the head. I've shared it with some friends at Caltech and MIT. I've shared it with some friends at Purdue and in aerospace and some other friends who were math theoreticians that are not teachers. And every one of them went, "Oh my God, you're complicating things." And I said, "No, not really." I said, "All you have to do is teach it alongside standard physics as it's being taught now and adopt this version. Because, geez, wouldn't it be nice to say, this is this, and it's just a little squiggle. It takes no more than a minute to write, but it contains like tons and tons of information. You no longer have to
Yes.
sit at a chalkboard for 7 hours to write out a single function. You go, oh, this is the function. If you do this, the light bulb turns on, right? Go to the next one. Instead of spending a whole week on how a light bulb works, right? You got, this is the symbol. This is what you need. Oh, rotational angular kinematics. Yeah, this is it. You write it down. You say, that's what you put in line to get your rocket ship over to Alpha Centauri. You need that. All right. Oh, you don't understand it? Okay, go back in the old textbooks. You bring out the old textbook and you knock the dust off. You decollapse the symbol, and then you reread it from its ancient Victorian origin and go, oh, yeah, duh. All right, come on, catch up. So we want the language to help people start to realize that our ancestors who compressed thousands of pieces of information into a hand or a spiral on a rock, we lost that gift when we attained Germanic language, Scandinavian language, Asiatic language, English derived on Latin. You know, we just lost it. And now we've got, you know, accent gravs and umlauts and commas and adjectives and all this other crap that we need to master in order that you understand. Well, if I didn't learn German, wenn du dies nicht, was heißt es, sterben und werden, bist du nur ein Traubegast auf der dunklen Erden. That's Goethe from the 20s. And he said, when you don't have this dying and becoming, you are only a sad guest on the dark earth. So that's so missing in our English literature today. He was talking about when you don't die in life, then you're just a sad guest. Hawking, the British philosopher and poet laureate Hawking, in the 30s, he wrote that the unresearched life is not worth living. So please use your mind to understand the dimensionality of your placement, how you affect Gaia, how you affect all the angelic spirits around us, because all humans deserve to be angels. They all have angelic spirits in them. We just need to bring them forward. So if we all speak the same language, then we'll all be able to have the same conclusions. And it doesn't have to be mathematic, because even though this is a very curious form of higher mathematics, it doesn't teach you how to develop your soul. It just develops different aspects of your logic centers, right? There are many lessons that are available to us in all forms of science and in walks of life that will help expand our minds and help expand our brains. This is just one of the many facets, but it's the next tool, I guarantee it, for learning a new form of higher mathematics that's easier to communicate. And when everybody knows it, you can communicate it with a song or a sound. So it'll become like dolphin. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be cool. So that's, you know, that's a sort of an in-depth look into CLPT and CLPF, how it works. They can coordinate any amount of information, but your mind has to be set up so that you have a healthy brain, that you're careful not to pollute it with lots of chemicals, that you're, you know, in good, relatively good shape, because it's really nice to be able to cognate higher thoughts. I love it when I wake up and the thoughts I'm having are not my own. It just means that someone's come and spoke to me at night.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's, you know, so I think a lot of 9/10 of the rules, a lot of us learn new things that way, as our spirit guides or our angelic guides come to us and speak to us privately. And they always
Yes.
talk to us about important things that are important to our soul. And so
Well, those periods of
we get
time,
those things right.
you're quiet enough and serene enough to receive those messages and have that dialogue.
Right.
People still, for the most part, it's my experience, people don't know how to quiet themselves enough. I remember long ago, well, not that really that long ago, when I was determined to understand how to meditate. And I just, for the life of me, could not find that place where your mind was quiet. It took me a while to get there. And there was a process I had to go through, like everyone else who gets here. But once I was there, I realized here is where I always want to be. I want to think from this perspective, because if I really believe in a field of probabilities, and your ability to quiet your mind to the degree where you can plant your intent in that place. The few times when I began to learn the concept and I could get there, I understood how powerful it was and how I never really wanted to come out of that meditation. Over time, when that just becomes part of who you are, that's
Yeah.
just your SOP now, your standard operating procedure. This is how I live my life, and I see myself from this perspective. So there's a piece that just comes with that. Over the last few days, we've been talking about vibration levels and achieving a level of peace that you just kind of carry with you. And so all this is timely. But I wanted to thank you, Dave, for sharing all this information, because with all of the increased dialogue that's going on, all of these images that has been reported of, the flashing lights and orbs and all of that kind of extraordinary concept, here is a way for us to kind of cognitize ourselves and understand what is taking place, because there's things beyond our capacity to understand it that are waking us up now, and
Right.
we're finally
There's
getting
a
to the point
purpose.
where it's happened. Yes. Well, I know why Earth herself is going through her own evolution of consciousness, and she's in a spiral that had nothing to do with humanity's level of awareness. She's
Yeah.
on her own path, and we're close to her moving into her next level. All
Right.
of these conversations we've been having is in preparation for everybody else to start asking the questions about our own levels of vibration, and what do we do to match where Earth is going, because she's almost there. That's why we've all started to talk about these things, when for 40 or 50 years we never talked about any of this. It wasn't on my radar. I was living a third dimensional life like everybody else and chasing the same things, enjoying the physicality of the planet. Well, there's a whole new gear we're kicking into, kids, and we've all been waiting for this. We're at the doorstep. That's all I can tell you. So every time we get an opportunity to understand what is happening, as we go along, I want to stop and record it. These nuggets of wonderful information we get from Dave, when he gets to expand on each one of the little pieces so that we understand it, it's exactly how I built my comprehension of what the hell I've been going through. I get one piece and I understand, I discern myself through the process, get it, because I needed to understand that before I could understand the next piece. And so when you share what you share, I just see that playing itself out, that Dave came along to add clarity to the next thing I was supposed to understand. And here it is. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thank you, Lowell. That's in line. When we receive a signal, it could be a repeater signal from Lyra, could be a light signal, could be flashes. Some people think, oh yeah, that's just starlight. Could be the lighthouse beacon of a planet trillions and trillions and trillions of miles away, sending Earth a message. The more we actively pursue trying to remain in touch with reality, the more we are able to. I finally got to the point where I meditate for 2 hours a day, an hour in the morning and an hour at night, right before I go to sleep, right when I get up. And I've been working on that for years, because meditation helps me calm my mind, because it is so very full. But I never meditate with the thought of I'm aspiring to be a bodhisattva. It's just a tool to help me calm down and to help the world around us. So remember, you guys, when you pick up a good habit, don't go at it like you have to master it. This is something that Lowell and I touched on a couple of weeks ago when we talked about walking in our own paths. Don't think that, every time you see an idea or you hear something good, that you have to have mastery over that subject. Just let it go through you. And if it's meant to resonate with you, then it will. Then you can take that thing and make an attribution to your heart. You can attribute it to your higher thinking. Take that little piece and use it, because it's all about developing your soul so that you can be a shining light. And then when we pass away, then we return these beautiful gifts and the experiences to source. And all of our friends, listen, like I said in the past many times, when they visit from other planets, they love to hold our hand or to be near us and breathe in our pheromones and our hormones, because it allows them to connect to love. They understand love, but they don't feel it like we do. And it's a very joyous, beautiful thing. So that's a lot of the time they want to be near us, is to have good feelings, and it helps them remember who they are. So they're very interested in making sure that as we move forward quickly, that we don't lose our humanity. Many of the things in science we shouldn't even be doing. There's a lot of things in science that we don't even need to study anymore. We should just accept things as they are, accept the nature of the universe as it is, and stop trying to find some stupid particle that's supposed to make the answer to why we exist. That's all crap. The only thing that's real is that which you feel, and the divine creator speaks to our hearts. That's it. So we all have that pathway to walk. So when you do meditation or deep breathing exercises, whatever it is that you choose to do, don't do it because you're trying to have mastery over it. Do it so that you could be at peace, inner peace with yourself, and peace with the world around you and all the people. That's all. Well,
Mastery
it's
is a
been a pleasure.
byproduct.
I hope that this has been a good look into a little bit more about information packages and how that technology works.
It was great for me. So if I hope it benefits others, and I'm certain that it will, but I got what I wanted to get out of it. But I had a fundamental level of information about it before that's kind of been growing, and I needed some clarity. So
Right.
thank you. I
You
kind of
bet.
feel selfish for what I asked
Oh,
for
listen,
here,
that's
but it was
no, it's
great.
fine. It's great. It gave me a chance to go back over some of the stuff that I've been working on earlier, because some of the equations I'm working on now are so simple equations like rotational and angular kinematics. I enjoy talking about because they're
Good.
easy to comprehend.
Well, thank you, buddy. We'll stop here, and I'm sure we'll be picking up on something again soon.
Right on.
Yeah.
Peace.
All right,
Much
buddy.
love,
Have a great
everybody.
day. Thanks all.
Namaste. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.